You are listening to The Manual with Mike Sheridan. The opinions expressed here are purely that of the individuals in question and can sometimes be of an adult nature.
You're very welcome to The Manual, Niall Breslin. I'm never sure what to call you. I've mentioned it a few times at this point now, and I'm never sure if it's Bressie, Bres, Niall.
I think when we're talking about serious things, you can call me Niall Breslin.
Niall Breslin.
When it's that kind of throwaway kind of other stuff, you can call me whatever you want.
We want to keep it intense. If your middle name or whatever, I can throw in there
Adam.
as well. Adam.
Niall
Adam Breslin.
My parents nearly broke up over that. They were like, they were fighting over the Niall and Adam. I would have preferred Adam, to be honest with you. But I got Niall.
Niall's a nice, strong Irish name, I think.
Trustworthy name, yeah.
Sound. I've read the book, and one of the first things that struck me, you didn't use a ghostwriter, you wrote it yourself.
Yeah, the option potentially was there to have a ghostwriter, and it was thrown around just because I didn't really have time because writing a book takes a lot of time, I realised.
You have to kind of tell somebody, it's almost like a form of therapy where you sit down and tell somebody about your life. Yeah.
I don't think anyone would have wanted that to be like, oh my God, I'm not writing that. And I kind of felt as well that I wouldn't have been as raw and honest if I had to do it to a third party. So what I did was actually write the first couple of chapters, maybe one or two drafts of the first couple of chapters, and sent it to the publisher, kind of going, waiting for them to come back. Okay, no, we definitely need a ghostwriter. And they actually came back and went, you're totally writing this yourself. It was the tone, was right tone, the language, like, even though, the one thing the one thing I wasn't sitting there with the thesaurus kind of going, trying to be, I was just trying to be as raw and as quick as I could. And if I overthought what I was writing, it came across that way. So it was just put it down and then spell it later.
You kind of keep to a fairly linear narrative in that it's your life. It's more an autobiography, I feel, with elements of touching on anxiety and touching on depression. And in the opening chapter, you talk about Israel. So for me, it was enlightening for me because it comes from a very real place. Like, and you paint a nice picture, or a terrifying picture in many ways. Because you're talking about shelling going on around you, or possible shelling going on around you, and having to go to bomb shelters. So this is a very real place. Is this where it started?
No, I always say that to my mum, and she thinks that she definitely thinks as a child I had that underlying ability to be worried all the time, and like I was never like, when you're 6 or 7, you'd always stay over in mates' houses. I would try and then ring them at 2 o'clock and go, I'm sick, bring me home. And she said, you really were that. And I was a mammy's boy. I don't mind saying. But I think Israel certainly was the awakening of it.
You were 13 when you went
13, yeah. My dad was in the Irish Army and was stationed over there. He's been stationed all over the world, Kuwait, Sarajevo, Lebanon a few times. And I kind of, this time he was going for a longer period, so he asked us to join him maybe for a couple of months to break it up, and we went over for I think 4 or 5 months. And as I said in the book, I really don't know if it was our fault, but like the Hezbollah and the IDF were kind of getting on all right for a while until literally at the day we landed. These hostilities kicked off and like on. And I just remember the first thing I realised when I got to Israel was that real underlying tension everywhere I went. Everyone had guns hanging around their shoulders, like big M16s. Everyone was there was like big ships out in the bay, big warships. There was helicopters going overhead. And, one half of it was kind of, this is pretty cool, but like, it's not Airwolf anymore. You're not watching it on TV. This is actually here. And it became a little bit intense. And about a week into being there, I just remember waking up at 3 or 4 in the morning with a woman with a loudspeaker basically roaring to get into the bomb shelters, that there had been a couple shelling into northern Israel, and wasn't like, we were only maybe 5 miles from the border or 10 miles from the border. So it was just like, as I said, anything that got my sisters out of bed was serious. And then like my mum and dad were like, listen, it's fine, this is quite normal.
Yeah, you talk about your dad coming into the room and talking about the missiles. One missile can go this. One is what did he say? Sorry,
one missile can't get this far, and the other missile goes over our head. That's the two. It was like brilliant. So hopefully they work okay, and we're in this kind of weird no man's land. And it was the other aspect of what Israel was very difficult for was the fact that even though my dad used to always say we were in the safest country in the world because they're the most powerful army in the world.
He was working for the UN at the time.
Yeah, he is UNIFIL and in southern Lebanon. But the fact was that Dad had to go into Lebanon every day, like he was going to work. I'd wake up in the morning, Dad would be like, see you later, literally driving into where this intense shelling was happening. And when I'm saying this, it sounds like I'm actually overselling it, but I'm not. Like, the ground was vibrating constantly, and there was bombs being dropped quite a while. And we'd hear these planes flying overhead on their like lunch break to go up and bomb Lebanon. It was insane. It was that idea. I think it was a very hostile time. It's quite a hostile area anyway, but that particular period was very intense, and it was the first kind of real kick-off of it in a long time. And we just happened to be there. It's in general, it's become a bit more of I wouldn't say safer, but at less the tension isn't as paramount there. You can see like Hezbollah are kind of depleted really in southern Lebanon. So it was just, I think, a history lesson in itself. And then you had the other aspect of religion, because all I'd been force-fed to that point was Catholicism.
Yeah.
That's all I knew. Like, Jesus was the man, and that was it. And if you said anything else, you got a fucking clip in the ear, and that was it. When I went over, it was just like, Orthodox Jews, Muslims, and
you're writing the book about a very funny conversation you had on the way over with an Orthodox Jew.
Yeah,
who kind of enlightened you.
He was it was such a lovely kind of conversation. He fell asleep on me first, and he drooled all over me, and I was like, the minute he woke up, he just saw me staring at him going, "I like your dress." That's all I could think of say to him. And they had the hats, the bowler hats, and I wasn't in any way being offensive. I didn't know what I was even saying, and he was kind of going, right, this kid is a bit clueless. He wouldn't say that otherwise. And he kind of, in a lovely kind of non-condescending way, told me about Israel, the land. So I mean, I understood about 5% of it, but still, it was nice, and it kind of it was a great start of when I was going to Israel. But when I got there, it was a different animal altogether, and that culture was certainly one I wasn't ready for. But on the other hand, I absolutely loved it. It was eye-opening for me. Yeah,
it was educational, and a plus to come out of it as well was were you kind of heavily into athletics or into sports before then? You kind of started to do some sports. I think you were saying with some of the army guys that were there.
I mean, I just shot up. I went from like being a chubby kind of 5'6" teenager to being 6 foot. Like literally, it was like X-Men.
So there's hope for all the small teenagers out there.
It is. I think any adults are kind of, it's a lost cause. But like as a 13-year-old, I kind of grew into this, almost like a mutant. I grew in over a couple of weeks, a couple of months, and I remember the growing pains in Israel. I'll never forget them. I used to get these intense pains in my legs, and that was growing pains at the time. But yeah, I got into sport. I was playing basketball. I was doing an awful lot of like playing football, but like we'd be playing football with like the soldiers, the Israeli soldiers, and they wouldn't take their guns off. So we'd be running around hitting you digs with the top of their gun. And you're like, all right, lads, take it easy. I think you do. That's probably why I got into rugby.
Yeah,
five-a-side football was too rough.
Yeah. Coming up concussions.
M16 five-a-side football. Imagine the lads down in like Mullingar five-a-side on a Tuesday after a dodgy tackle, right? So I kind of grew into my body a little bit, I suppose, and realised I was athletic enough.
Yeah, you're kind of genetically anyway. You knew you were going to be a big guy. You just needed to fill it out. And 13, 14, 15 for any kids, that's an awkward age. It was for me. I looked 30 when I was 13. Anyway, see freaking hairy I am now.
You would have my go-to guy for the blue woodies. And
going out on the way. I was getting that for people that were older than me. That was hilarious. That's brilliant. Actually, could have. I mean, it's a difficult time for anybody. It really is. And the details that you write in the book, it's obviously deeply, deeply personal. But school seemed to become a point for you, or secondary school. I know you switched schools. That things kind of really started to get on top of you. That shit started to get to you a little bit when you're trying to figure out who you are. You're trying to refine what your tastes, what you're into, and you had this to deal with as well.
Yeah, no, I think secondary school was certainly the start of it was massively difficult for me, and it was purely because I didn't even know what it was. I didn't know what anxiety was. I hadn't a full explanation. I didn't have the language to even talk about what it was, and I was getting hit like every time. It's kind of hard to explain it, but every time I lay down flat, I felt as if I was going to drown, and I get this panic attack, and it constantly just kept happening to me. And it was just I think the real crucial thing that really started negatively destroying me mentally was lack of sleep. I started associating my bed and my room and trying to sleep with panic, and I could not sleep, and I would go days with maybe an hour or two of sleep, and that does awful things to your mind and your brain and your body, even physically. So I was dealing with all this, and on one hand dealing with that, but also doing relatively well as an athlete, and I was playing captain my school football team, things like that. So I was doing it in spite of it. But I do have to say, I think the changing school as well didn't help, and there was such chronic bullying in
you changed school so you could. You wanted the music. You wanted the music for your leaving cert.
Yeah, there was a music scholarship program called Scola, and this other school called St. Finian's in Mullingar, which is now, at the time, I think it still is a boarding school, but it's now a mixed school, and it's an entirely different place to when I was there. But there was real kind of institutionalized bullying going on there, like there is in most boarding schools, and any teachers that say otherwise are being naive and putting their head in the sand. Like bullying is still a major part in our schools, but back then it was quite strategic, and I wasn't bullied because I was 6 foot odd and whatever, but I was watching it, and the people in my class were badly bullied, and because it was like only 12 was in the scholarship program, and the guys doing the program were quite quiet lads and kept to themselves, and they were getting such a hard time and physically beaten up and mentally tortured, and it was just, I used to take all that on myself.
Yeah.
And then mix that in with the anxiety and the panic attacks I was having. I'd go home at night and I would just think of that one guy who got a slap.
Is that what it comes back to an awful lot? Does it come back to worrying about other people, not so much about you?
It's definitely part of it.
Yeah.
Even now, even in Israel with Dad, that was worse. Wasn't me, it was him.
He was going off around the world all the time, doing tours and.
No, no doubt about it. I think I've always had that kind of inability. I think it's good to care for people like that and worry about others. But if you don't know how to cope, and there is a fine line between letting it affect you and being able to, because there was nothing I could do about it, which was quite difficult. Yeah, but school in general was tough because it was just at the time, as I said, I remember. There was a big mental hospital in Mullingar called St. Loman's, and everyone used to joke that you're going to end up there, your mother's in St. Loman's, your dad's in St. Loman's. That was literally the only joke we had as teenagers in Mullingar. It was like, oh, you should be in Loman's. It was, and all I could think in my head is, if I ever tell people how bad this really is, I'm going to end up in St. Loman's, and I'm going to be the butt of every joke of every person in this town.
And this isn't that long ago.
No,
it's
17 years. Yeah. So that's kind of the thought processes I had, and I also just didn't fully understand what it was, and that grew to self-harm, to quite serious kind of depression and lack of sleep, physical. My hair was falling out.
You're just kind of walking around like a zombie because you're getting an hour's sleep a night at best.
But what I used to do, I mean, thinking about this, I didn't really write about it in the book, but I remember I used to go into school and I would be a zombie, and we'd have 11 o'clock break, and I'd go down to the tuck shop and literally 5 packs of mummies, a couple of Wappa bars, Royal Rovers bars, sugar,
just to get you through it,
just to wake me up. And I'd be like, oh yeah, I feel a bit better. Then 12 o'clock, bang, gone again. And then I'd go down and get it. I was really just surviving through school, and then I'd have to train after after school. But we were quite a big Gaelic football school, so it was a huge part of it. But Jesus, it was a difficult kind of, and the only saving grace of the whole thing was the stability and support I had from home, and I just had a really top family that were easygoing. We didn't have any issues at home. Very loving background, and that was certainly a massive help.
Yeah.
Because if I had to deal what I was dealing with, and had to deal with bullying, or maybe going home to a dysfunctional family, or I don't know what would have happened. And I think there's people out there who are in that situation that. I think that's why it's even more important that they're allowed get the help, because if they're not getting it at home, they need to get it somewhere.
And you speak about your mum a good bit in the book too. She's Glasgow born, and you seem to have a really lovely relationship with her. So it's obviously been important throughout the years and even now, just to keep your mind on track and to keep your mind in the right place.
Yeah, I think she doesn't really know it, but she always played everything quite perfectly. And I mean, it was like, for her, like, it was quite upsetting when, she finally realised the extent of my anxiety, because she was like, how did we miss it? And I was like, well, Mum, I always knew you were there. I always knew you were there. And the way she talked about, she knew the type of person I was. She never pushed me too much. She never goes, just what's wrong with you? We need to this, she never was that person. She used to always just say, if you need anything, you can say it. And I always knew that support was there. And there would always be little glimpses of telling her stuff, but never fully. Because for many reasons, I didn't want her to have to deal with it. I didn't want her to have
This is that worrying about other people again.
Yeah, I didn't want her have heard this to go, I have a son who's self-harming and has got a serious anxiety disorder. I don't have to. And I kind of was trying to protect her for her, because even at times Dad would be away and it would just be me and her and maybe my younger sister Andrea, and Mum would be dealing with all that, and you're keeping a job, or she used to do a lot of music teaching and stuff, so she had a lot on her plate. So I didn't really want to throw that into the equation. And even I used to write to Dad when he went away, we'd write a letter every Sunday, and it would be sent to him by airmail, like old school. And I used to always just say, everything's brilliant, amazing, I'm having so much. I just felt I had to keep doing that.
You don't want him worrying about you while he's over there.
Jesus, no. Like what he needs to know is everything's grand, and your mum's grand, and you're grand. And that's kind of what I did, the Irish way, everything's grand. And I think with Mum, overall, my relationship with her is always been incredibly, I think we've so much in common too. Like, we're massive music fans. All my love of music has come from her, because my dad hasn't a musical bone in his body. And I don't know, I just think that I even see her relationship with my sisters. It's a very strong, it's not even like a motherly relationship. It's just a very strong friend as well. There's
a great quote. I think it's again, I've brought him up a couple of times in the podcast before, but the comedian Louis C.K. He's been interviewed, and he's talking about how close relationship he has with his mum. He doesn't have a particularly close relationship with his dad, but I thought he put it very articulately. I didn't say articulate right, but he put it very well when he said that sometimes you grow up and you become friends with your parents, or you don't. Yeah. And I thought that was a really lovely way of putting it.
Well, that's exactly. Well, I think
we still your parents.
We couldn't go any other way. Well, I think what happened, obviously, with Dad spending so much of my childhood away, me and Dad have always had a really strong relationship, but it's certainly a different type of relationship than the one I have with my mother. Whereas I have this kind of innate respect for what not just for what he does, but how he treated his kids. You know, everyone expected an army man to be this strict, it's my way or the highway, you're going to join the army and clean my boots. And he couldn't have been the more opposite. He was like, you do what you want to do, whatever you're passionate about. You know, no matter what anyone says to you. Yeah. Like, geez, that's a really...
Because you write about your dad in the book, and you write about him getting upset when he would have to leave to go off and do these tours. And that's something that I found with, you know, these guys that would have been perceived as manly men, or these guys who have manly professions or do manly things, whatever it might be, you know, manly in inverted commas. They might be fighters, they might be in the army, whatever it is, professional athletes. They always seem to be the ones who are, you know, obviously are not. They're the more emotional ones, and they're not afraid to show that.
No, like even you look at something like, what's one of the biggest sports in Ireland at the moment? I think more growing sports is MMA, and UFC is huge at the moment. Everyone just sees these UFC fighters as these beasts that have, like, I've never seen athletes work so much more on their mental health and their mental resilience. And often a lot of these people who are doing sports like this are doing it as a form of therapy for other issues that they might have faced maybe at home. And that's across all elite sports. So we have this idea of macho-ness in sport. Like, an awful lot of athletes I know, even at an endurance level like triathlon, are doing it because I met a guy at triathlon last week, and he was kind of probably in his mid-50s, and he just goes to me, you know, I like what you're doing with the whole exercise mental health thing. And I'm like, yeah, thanks a million. And he goes, yeah, my wife passed away this time last year, and I was lost, and this is what saved me. This, you know, not just triathlon, but exercise, friends, people giving me a focus. You know, don't get me wrong, I still hurts every single day. And he was welling up, and I was like, man, it's all right to well up. You lost your wife, why are you being... And he just let it all go. And then the nice thing ever was, like, 3 of his mates just came around him, didn't even say anything, just put their arms around him. And that type of open public, like, this idea that we're robots and we don't hurt or we don't feel emotion is ridiculous. And we've been bred to be that way. We've been bred in school. And
I think there's something that goes back. I don't know what it is. A certain generation or a few generations back, maybe people that were born in the 40s and 50s and certainly before, especially Irish men. It's just this, you know, and it could be a myriad of things, but there just seems to be this repression and this, you can't show emotion, you can't get upset, especially not in front of people. But, and you know, and I'm partly due to the good work of people like yourself, you can see that turning around now.
You know, definitely see it turning around, but you got to look at different things. I don't mean this it's not a headhunt, it's not negative, but things like the Catholic Church, things like the hold that would have had over us and how that was the moral high ground and everything. And that kind of filtered into schools where all that really mattered was education and academic achievement, or whether you're a good athlete, or whether you're this or whether you're that. And all of a sudden what happened is that human development just kept getting pushed further and further down the pecking order of importance, and that then went into workplaces. It became about money, profit, economics, further and further and further, to the point where people were kind of going, we're really not really worth a lot. and people start getting self-esteem issues, and then go like when they have to go into work and they don't feel valued, all these aspects of stuff. And what people like myself and Connor are trying to engage in a conversation is we need to reset that pecking order in education system. Everyone goes to me, like I've had mothers go, you can't say, like, I would rather them get an extra hour of maths a week than they would. That's a ridiculous statement. And I'm sorry, that's not an opinion, that's a ridiculous statement. You could be Stephen Hawking, you could be a genius, but if your mind is rebelling against you, all that ability is worthless. And if you have a child or a teenager that's dealing with a serious emotional issue, they need to be supported. And they need to learn how to cope with that. And the best, most effective way of doing that right now is in our education system. So I feel it shouldn't be part of the education system. It should be prioritized. It should be the top of the order in the education system. And I think if we start doing that and we spend a lot more time, like, I mean, if I was able to go in and do the Our Father 5 times a day and Hail Mary and all this other thing, could we not have maybe done 3-4 minutes of mindfulness, teach primary school how to engage with mindfulness, things like that, CBT, counselling, therapy. And what's happening in Ireland is we just keep cutting and cutting and cutting teachers and resources and stuff like that. We need to start investing in, rather than going, this will be fixed if you spend more money on mental health services. Yes, that's part of the equation, but we got to have a longer term vision of what this is and how to actually implement change and change attitudes in Ireland, because changing an attitude is a very difficult thing to do in this country.
It takes education. And just to bring it back to you for a second, I've been at events with you in the past, and I can only imagine everybody wants to speak to you, especially about kind of, heavy issues, and but important, but heavy issues, and everybody seems to kind of want a piece at you. If you're speaking at an event, obviously it's like any keynote speaker at an event. That must be, bringing it back to you, is it more and more difficult for you then to give everybody a slice of your time, give everybody a piece of your time, because these aren't 2 or 3 minute conversations that you can have with people. So is it a little bit daunting for you? Is that still something that's in the back of your head? You can't give everybody the time that they require.
Well, there's 2 things that I need to say in that. Number 1 is I am not a psychologist, and I'm not qualified to be divvying out like health advice, and I don't. Like, my first thing I would say to someone like that, if they tell me their story and it eases them a bit and helps them, that's brilliant. Tell away. When they go, what should I do? The first thing I will always say is you have to engage a healthcare professional. You have to. That's why they're there. And I think that's the first thing. The second thing is Conor Cusack said something that was really probably the most important thing he said to me in our probably relationship was last year at Electric Picnic. And I remember we were about to go on to speak at it, and I just said to him, and I was feeling a bit uneasy because I'd just done maybe 2 weeks of talking in schools, and I'd heard some stories that were, I'd heard a few stories that really got to me, and I just said to him, Conor, does this ever overwhelm you or get to you, or cause you to get anxious or lower? And he goes, well, I'm going to tell you this now, and this is the best advice I can give you. He said, if you walk into a room with 1,000 people and one of them walks out of that room in a better place, or willing to seek help, or willing to do something, or willing to maybe put their hand on their mate's shoulder, just one person, that's all you should think of. If you try to think of those 1,000 people, it'll overwhelm you. That one person. And what I started doing then was went into a room and I spoke. I would find one person that I could walk away knowing that they've had an experience that have helped them in some way. And that is all you can do. And I think, yes, I wish I could save everybody and put my arms, but I can't. And I also have to keep an eye on my own mental health constantly.
Absolutely, and that's the point I was getting at.
Yeah, and
because if you're a worrier and you've only got a couple of minutes with somebody and you can't. It's just logistics.
But I'm a different place to her, right? When I say I've spent 4 or 5 years of intense work on my mind. That sounds like some kind of crazy, like lobotomy kind of like Shutter Island thing. But I genuinely spent every day for years trying to work out how mindfulness and meditation could help me, because when I started I hated it. I thought this is the waste of my time, but I promised myself,
it requires training like anything else,
everything. It requires months of it, and it requires little baby steps with it. Start slow, do 4 or 5 minutes of it, try and engage with it. Use an app, and then maybe if you start develop, the app really helps you, like Headspace, maybe look at a mindfulness coach. Go in with them. Don't underestimate the power of what mindfulness can do. And mindfulness isn't for people with mental health illness. It's for everybody. Everybody should be doing it. It's everybody. We're a million miles an hour. We need to learn how to switch off. And we will all deal with something terrible in our life. That's life. Horrible thing to say. We will all have trauma. We could lose someone we love, lose our jobs. Are we all able to cope with that? I don't know. That's the problem. And do we want to just go the good old Irish way when something like that happens and get absolutely shit-faced for feckin' 2 weeks and just numb everything? That's not the answer either. So I think there are these things you can do. I went and got literally jumped into cognitive behavioural therapy, found that really effective. Exercise, diet, medication. I'm not afraid to say that I was on medication for many years. I unfortunately abused and self-medicated for a long time too.
Just saying, this is mostly with the sleeping tablets, just to
tablets,
just to knock yourself out.
Just completely zonk myself, and I would take maybe 1, 2 or 3 a night. And you kind of, addiction's funny. Addiction sneaks up on you. You don't even know what's happening. And
especially if you can burn the candle at both ends. Especially if you can go and seem like a functional, you're fine.
That's the thing, the word functional and addiction can confuse a lot of people. You assume if you're functioning, you're not addicted, but that's just not true.
And reading the book as well, again, because you do write it from a point of view of 13 or so all the way through to very much the present. I had no idea, I'm not a huge rugby guy, I had no idea at the elite level of rugby that you played at. You had a 3-year professional contract with Leinster. You played for Leinster, was it for 2 seasons?
Yeah.
2 seasons, so that's kind of, very few people get to reach those kind of levels. And you play, I know you 2 full seasons, so you played a lot of games. How do you look back at those? Because I know it was a difficult time for you as well. Just curious, do you look back at those games, whether you're in a happy place or whether you weren't in a good place? Do you still look back at those games and that time fondly?
No. Professional rugby is a sport. I love it. I love sport, everything about it. As a professional athlete, I wasn't able to cope with it. And I'm just being honest. I know lots of other athletes who are in the same boat as I am now. It's a high pressured kind of situation, injury, things like that. When somebody has another underlying issue like I had anyway, I assumed that once I became a professional rugby player, everything would go away and I'd be grand. And that's one of those relationships I had with my mental health. When something good like that happens, got my contract, my
you write about that as well, because when you first get told that Leinster are going to sign you on a 3-year professional contract, you got upset, you got physically upset. Whereas you should have been air punching with joy.
Well, see, I got upset because I didn't feel anything.
Yeah.
And I need to describe that, and some people got confused with what I meant by that. I couldn't feel anything. I couldn't feel happy. I couldn't, if something great happened, I'd sometimes put on that I'm even happy.
And were you medicating around then as well? Were you self-medicating?
Not really.
This is around
not
college.
as much. Not when I was very occasionally, well, not even quite a lot. I maybe take Xanax or a Valium, but what I was doing was and it's something that I learned was a huge issue, and an awful lot of people who have mental health illnesses like anxiety and depression will tell you that one of the most difficult things to do is to have any compassion for yourself, or anything you've done, or anything you do, or feel happiness. And that sounds like a really morbid thing to say. And I've had a brilliant life. I just haven't been able to enjoy it. And that's not a poor me or any of that shite. It's genuinely, I'm just telling you, things have happened in my life. And then, for example, I'll give you the opposite of that. I remember, even things like proper human emotion, I just couldn't. I'd see people going, I'm so happy. I'm like, I'll just pretend I am, even though I wouldn't. And even when great things would have happened to me, I still couldn't feel that way. And I remember, this is after in recent years where I had worked so much on my mental health and my mind, and I got to I believe it's like a well-oiled machine now. And I remember realizing I'm really on the road to recovery. I really am. When I did a triathlon in Kilkenny. My sister, when the triathlon was over, handed me my nephew Billy over the railings, and I remember grabbing him, and the feeling I got was just unadulterated love, genuine, just that feeling of real happiness. And I just said to myself, Jesus, that's what it was just undeniable.
And that was the first time that you really...
No, it'd been filtering in, but it was just that really kind of, because when she had Billy, my nephew, I remember that day as well, and getting just, Jesus, I actually really feel this. I feel this to the core of me, and it was a lovely feeling. But then when I suppose when he grabbed me, it was just that feeling. And that's, I suppose, one of the most difficult parts. And I think one of the things from the Borgosh speech that most people really found difficult was that idea of not being able to have that empathy or that love. And that was one of the most frustrating things for me, that I went through those years kind of seeking it but never finding it or never feeling it. And now I feel it. I feel that, that genuine kind of bond with people, and it's brilliant. It's like something that I feel like it's, you're kind of slightly over enthusiastic with it now. I'm not going around hugging everyone like I'm at a rave because I just spend so much of my life not doing that. You know?
And I think one thing that the Irish do very well is humour, and there's often humour in tragedy or in something that there might not obviously be humour in.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said this to you before, and you've said to me, look, I've got kind of a dark sense of humour. You know, laughter has to come out of the other side at certain points.
Yeah.
You know, like your mates are going to take the piss out of you no matter what, whatever they see. You know, it's like if you're out of shape and you start to lose weight, your friends are going to say, "Oh, fair play, you start to lose weight." When you look good, they're going to be like, "The fucking state of you. Who do you think you are?" It's
brilliant. It's a personality trait of the Irish that I don't think we should ever lose. That kind of inbuilt default cynicism that we have. It's brilliant. And the one thing I need to point out with this is so someone says to me, what would you love to see happen around mental health and conversation? I'd like to see the conversation normalised. This idea in Ireland of us being offended all the time, constantly offended, just you can't say that, you can't do that.
That's everywhere now. That's not just Ireland.
I know, but from my experience, from what I've noticed in the last time, I'm just like, Jesus Christ, everyone's always offended. That must be hard work, being offended all the time.
Waiting on someone to be offended
Jesus
by.
Christ, it's just like this on the edge of their seat. And with the mental health conversation, if we want to normalise it, we can't jump down everybody's throat when they say something that mightn't be on the point, or mightn't be right, or might be slightly offensive, or maybe throw away, like, that guy's a psycho, or throw away mental health references. And I've seen people going, you can't say that. I said, lads, we can't do that.
That's because you're never going to normalise the conversation.
You won't normalise. If anyone feels they're going to get their head ripped off anytime they open their mouth, they're going to go, well, I'm going to sit in the fence here and not say anything. That won't get us anywhere. So we need to engage with the conversation. And if you meet somebody who has a completely kind of draconian view of mental health and what it is, it's not your job to educate them. But it's also not your job to go, oh my God, you're so offensive. You should. It's just go, right, grand, listen, leave it. And that's really, really important. And in my case, my mates ripped the absolute piss out of me about it. They do, and it actually.
That's how you know they're real friends.
Yeah,
genuinely.
Exactly. They're just like, geez, like I came in the other day. I was a group with them, and we were going to watch the match, but it was like it was in a pub and I wasn't even drinking, and I was just not in a great mood. I was tired. I was just tired, and they went. And I walked in and they were like, listen, if you're going to be fucked. I went, listen, we're in great moods now, Bressie. Fuck. I was like, and rather than going piss off, like, would you piss off, lads? Because I get it.
Yeah.
And they understand. And the one thing I always say with friends, whether it's loved ones or whatever, if you don't have honesty, complete honesty, then it's not true friendship.
And that's how we compliment people in Ireland as well, by taking the piss out of them. Like
Absolutely.
Myself and my brothers have 4-letter words for each other, so we used to greet each other, and that's how we know we love each other.
But that's it. And anyone else does it, they get a slap, and that's perfectly okay. And I think that's the one thing. I've been doing interviews even today, and it's been so funny because you get these people coming into the interviews and they're like,
they expect you to be like,
so did you mind if I'm like, lads, for fuck's sake, I just wrote a book that's going into shops that anybody can read about literally the most raw things that have happened to me. It's all right if you ask me about it. It's grand. Like, and then like you just want to go in the middle of some of the interviews and go boo, just because they're so
the last thing they're going to be expected.
If we want to normalise, and that's not in any way. There's a huge difference between normalising it and being throwaway about it.
Yeah.
Huge difference.
If somebody's genuinely ignorant, it's completely different from somebody who's taking the piss a little bit or maybe just doesn't understand it.
Well, you're talking, man. If 30%, and I'm not mad for statistics, but if 30% of this country have moderate to severe mental health issues, that's the most common illness in the country. The most common illness in the country, and we still don't really talk about it. And when we do, it's muted, and it's like we can't speak about it, and it's too dark. But to be fair to Irish media, new and old, they're engaging with it. They are engaging with this conversation. But I think maybe when I'm speaking about it, I often make people quite awkward about it and put them really. They're like, oh my God, he's saying that. I can't believe he just said that. And I'm like, but why? We've spent so many years not having this conversation. And I also, only yesterday, had a guy say to me, it was online, but I knew him actually, and he said to me, Jesus, Bressie, thanks to you, everybody has depression now in Ireland. And I just tweeted him back, and I didn't get angry with him or anything. I just said, maybe it's the fact that 30% of people in this country, but it's a lot of people, your work colleagues, your brother, your sister, your friends, maybe it's just because they've hid it for so long.
They feel like they can talk about it.
They feel they can talk now. So maybe that's all that is. And he goes, yeah, I suppose. And I went, So it's all right to come into the work and go, I've got a cold, I have a snotty nose, but you can't come in and say. And the thing about it is, like, it's not a conversation. You don't have to go in like the thing with the book is I couldn't half write it. I had to be very, very honest and raw.
Yeah.
I had to really put it out there. If I just started talking about those couple of months I felt low and I had a few panic attacks, but everything's grand now, it wouldn't have had that. It wouldn't have brought people in. It wouldn't have educated people who don't understand what they are. So a mother that reads the book can read the book and go, I have a daughter who I know is having panic attacks and maybe is self-harming. I do not get it. I don't understand it. I don't have any why she does it. For her maybe to read the book, she might get a little clearer understanding of what it feels like, how terrifying
maybe
it is.
let her feel that it's okay to talk about it as opposed to have to talk about it.
Absolutely.
It's an open environment.
And that's the other thing. It's not my place to tell a mother or father how to deal with what's going on. But the one thing I would say is empathy is absolutely critical. And one thing I've realised over the last couple of years of doing this and actually working on documentaries on it is one of the most effective forms of therapy. And this is undeniable, and any clinical psychologist or any healthcare professional will tell you this. Yes, things like medication, things like CBT counselling, things like psychotherapies, mindfulness, they all can be quite effective. Peer-to-peer social support is one of the most critical parts of therapy, is that you need that support from loved ones or friends. So if any friend or mother or father asks me, what can I do? There's your answer. Peer-to-peer social support. And so support isn't going, what's wrong with you? Jesus Christ, not again, not today, Jesus Christ. Support is going, I tell you what, if you want anything, open your room, drop me a text, I'll bring you up tea or whatever. That's support. That's how to speak. Don't get angry, don't get frustrated, because that just throws guilt into the equation. And I think for me, I was very lucky to have family that did realise that, and they realised, whereas I maybe had friends who didn't know, going, you are an ignorant bastard. Where did you go last night? Like, we were sitting in the pub at 10 o'clock and you just disappeared. What an ignorant dick. And I'm going back in my head going, if only you knew.
Yeah.
And there'd be days I could be in a pub and I go to the toilet and I just get wrapped
you go
with
missing
panic.
for a couple of hours.
Just wrapped with panic. I just go, I got to get out of here. And I get out. And the only problem was me, I could never get through the toilet windows. There's just like silhouettes of me in this kind of brick wall in the toilet. It goes, who's that? Oh, it must be Bressie again.
Somebody's waiting to go to Jackson. You've been in there for 2 hours.
Yeah, just going shit. Like, that's genuinely, these are the things that happen. But having friends now that kind of go, oh, so the text would have changed from you're an ignorant dick going to, I hope you're okay, I'll chat to you tomorrow. The difference that makes.
Then you get some stick tomorrow.
Yeah, you get absolutely, and that's quite okay, because usually I'm all right for the next day.
What part has exercise played in this? Because I know you've done the Ironman, you've done the 70.3s. And you write in the book as well, you talk about a night where you would go running at night when you couldn't sleep. You'd have the runners next to the bed, and it was your way of being mindful, and your way of kind of, I don't know whether you want to call it switching off or switching on.
The Forrest Gump technique.
Yeah, because it's a very difficult thing to do, and I've done it where I've ran for extremely long periods of time on my own.
Yeah.
On my own. And I mean, my trick was just distract myself. What was your trick to...
Well, my trick with it was, and this is how the nocturnal running, and I'm a terrible runner. I'm not even a long distance runner.
Just seen a 6'5" guy running towards you up a canal,
and like a gazelle
in the middle of the night
with this wildly panicked face. Just picture it like he's either robbed something or he, And I genuinely I should have ran out in like jeans so people just thought I was running home. But what would happen is at like 2 or 3 at night, I went through this period where I was getting night terrors, and a lot of people might know what they are. Night terrors is when you could wake up in the middle of the night and as if something's sitting on your chest, or you could be paralyzed, or you could just be, it's just panic, it's sheer panic. And I got into this horrible routine and habit of that happening, and it was every night, and it was I'd wake up at 2 o'clock, and once it happened, that's it, you're awake, you're not getting back to sleep because your heart rate is pounding and you're sweating, and your muscles are sore and your head is racing. So what I started doing was, what would happen is I'd wake up with a sore throat, and then within 5 minutes I'd be gone, I'd be on the floor, and I used to just bring it on. So what I started doing was put on my runners, and the neck would get sore, and I just put the runners on before I even had time to think, and just go run. And I would run till that kind of uneasiness settled and went away, that lump in my throat went away. And the first night I ran a couple of kilometres, got back into bed, fell asleep, which was lovely, woke up the next day going, I feel all right actually. And I did that every night for almost, I think it was like 12 or 13 nights. And the 13th night I got up and I ran like nearly 30 kilometers in the middle of the night. And the next day something really strange happened. I slept straight through. And I hadn't slept maybe 15 years. I hadn't slept straight through a night.
Was it an element of replacing, the self-medication with exercise?
Well, I had done, and this one, I don't advocate this as a thing people should do.
No, this is obviously you.
This is me. This was a kind of a game plan. I wanted to kind of explain where I came to this reasoning, as what I felt was what was happening. As I kind of tried to do the math on it, and I said, I'm waking up and my mind is going a million miles an hour, which is affecting my behaviour and making me panic, and the adrenaline is going off my body. And adrenaline's great, like when you need it, before a triathlon or before a run, it's great to have that adrenaline coursing through your body. It's not great having it at 2 o'clock at night, like where your fingers are pulsing and you're like, Jesus Christ. And that's what I realised what was happening. So I went, well, why don't I burn that adrenaline off? And that was kind of what my thought process behind it. And for me, I also knew I was in a real horrible habit. My brain was just in a habit of it happening. And I started doing that, and I realised, it was weird because it was the first time I realised I had that little bit of control. Whereas before, at that point, I would have popped a couple of tablets and that might have kind of eased it a bit. But then you'd have to wait that hour for it to ease you down. And this was like an immediate thing. I was like, right, about to have a panic attack, go. And they never came. I was like, Jesus, that's just not sustainable. Like you can't be in the middle of like work or a gig and just go, right lads, I'm off. You just can't do that. So I realized, but it really opened my eyes and let me go, Jesus, there's things I can do here. This is something that's really, really worked for me. And then exercise has always been part to play. But more so, a couple of things is, I reckon I made the connection that when I was abusing my immune system, like I was drinking a lot of alcohol, I was eating a lot of bad food, sugar, shit, chocolate, processed foods. When some people do that, they get a chest infection or they get a bit sick or run down. I get really, really, really low. When my immune system starts getting destroyed, I get really low. So I started looking at how do I really bolster that immunity and my immune system, and like through diet, through avoiding alcohol, through exercise, all these different things. So I started doing that, and that took a bit of time. Wasn't immediately effective, and then it wasn't just the exercise, it was then the ability to go, right, I want to get outside my comfort zone and I want to start pushing myself a little bit now and doing things that I always thought were impossible, like a triathlon, because I had this just crippling fear of water, any water. I hated water, I hated fish, I hated everything about it. And I did the most logical thing, and this was all in the same period as the Forrest Gump technique. I went, right, I'm going to sign up for an open water sea swim race, only 8, and I at this point wasn't able to swim at all. I wouldn't put my head in water. And I signed up for this in 8 weeks. And it basically was, at the time, saying to Jeffrey, right, Chief, I'm calling the shots. I know you don't want this, but I'm giving this a shot. And it also, what it made me do is over those 8 weeks is really concentrating on my mental health and my fitness and my mindfulness and my meditation, my counselling, my visualization, all these things I've been working on. It made me go, right, you've 8 weeks to really go at this. And so that swim wasn't in any way, my first open water swim wasn't a physical thing at all. It was 8 weeks of solid work on my mind, and I remember walking away from the first open water swim and genuinely feeling proud of myself, and that's a big
more
thing.
More you conquered a fear than you'd done something athletically, or
it was nothing to do with the athletic side of it. It was the fear and the phobia, and also the investment over those 8 weeks that I put in. Like I basically set aside this kind of 8 weeks of maybe building from 20 to 25 minutes a day of mindfulness to building that to 40 minutes maybe a day. And that sounds like not a lot of time, but it is quite a hard thing to stay still for 45 minutes. I started working on that like really, and then things like visualization, I started realizing how important mental imagery can be, and I just started studying it. And through that 8 week period, I was noticing these insane brilliant changes in terms of my sleep. Not only was I sleeping better, but it was quality sleep. It was sleeping through a night.
Deep sleeps.
Yeah, with proper sleeps where you wake up and you do feel, wow, I feel actually completely energized. And that was such an amazing feeling.
And it's funny because I would have occasionally as well, I'd be of a similar mindset of when sometimes your brain just starts thinking and you just can't sleep. Your brain's thinking, you're thinking of a million and one different things, maybe worrying about something, maybe just thinking about work or whatever it is. So I would have had the odd sleeping tablet. I would have grabbed the odd sleeping tablets. And a friend of mine who works in the UK, works for a big medicinal company, knows an awful lot about it, isn't a doctor or anything like that. But she said it to me, and it was her that kind of made me realise is like if you've had a sleeping tablet or something, and absolutely they have their uses, it goes without question under the proper circumstances. But she would say to me, you need to look at what's in them, and also if you're in a bad, she would say whenever she would have one, if she was in a bad mood the next day, she'd be like upset, or she'd be in, it's a downer essentially.
Yeah, it is.
And you need to be aware of that.
Yeah.
So if your brain's constantly going and you're going, I'm fine, I had a sleep last night and grand, and you're just going to grind through the day, that's not good either.
No.
So it's been mindful of your moods as well.
Yeah.
And kind of if you're in a bad mood, and this is only something I learned recently, if I'm in a bad mood, I'm going to go, right, genuinely looking at the crap I've eaten the day before, if I've had a chance to train, if haven't been feeling well, or if I haven't been sleeping well or something like that. So again, this is something me at 33, I've only just learned.
But this is something, and especially recently you saw the kind of furore of what happened with the Rosanna Davison thing and with the book, and it was like, you can't say that. And I mean, I haven't read it, to be honest. I haven't read anything of what's been said. So in my back of my head, I'm always wary of, like, as someone who's not qualified in what I'm talking about, saying anything.
You can only say what's worked for you. You can only say what absolutely worked for you.
But one thing I have to point out is that I think you would be incredibly naive to think that diet and your food and alcohol intake and all that stuff has nothing to do with it. I think that can be naive. I think that the food side of it is certainly part. It certainly plays a part, and it does with mine. I think all those aspects of when you're pumping processed chemicals into your brain, I don't think that's particularly good for people who have quite a, probably a slightly, some chemical imbalances anyway. So I think food is certainly something people should look at. Will it be the be all end up? Absolutely not.
It's not helping.
The idea of any one particular thing being the savior. Even if you're on medication, like when I was on medication, I had an amazing GP, and I was on quite a heavy dosage of my medication, a fixer at the time, and I never relied fully on it. I always said, I'm going to do everything else as well. I'm going to do all the other things. So I'm not just going to go, give me the medication and fix me. The medication pulled me out of a hole. It allowed me kind of, I feel, get that little bit of strength to really go after the other therapies I wanted to work on. And it also, in my head, because I had such a brilliant GP, I was able to say to him, listen, I feel I don't want to be on antidepressants all my life. So I'm going to use them for the next couple of years, really seek all these different things that I can do. And ultimately it was a combination of 5 or 6 different things that now that I do on a daily basis, it's part of my routine. I wake up in the morning, positive psychology, absolutely an amazing science-based psychology. And psychology, everyone thinks is science. Psychology is based on research. It's not always based on pure fact. So positive psychology has scientific backgrounds to it. Things like gratitude, waking up in the morning before your feet even touch the floor, going 30 small thank yous. When I wake up every morning, I keep my eyes shut and I go, I just say I'm thankful for my mother, toast, fucking the stupidest toothpaste.
You're saying this out loud?
Yeah, oh, no, you do it in your head, obviously.
Mrs. was going to say, wake her up.
Feck off, go make your toast. And I would say that, like just have to be silly things, but what it does is it sets off these neurotransmitters in your brain and it makes you feel good. It makes, geez, that's nice, I feel good, I'm thankful. You look at Conor McGregor, have you ever seen him do an interview where he doesn't go, I am internally thankful for? Yeah. He is practicing positive psychology in every interview he does. Things like, the other thing with positive psychology is toxic environments, judgment. Sitting in a room, tearing someone's character apart, ripping them apart, tearing them, bullying them, slagging them. That's really not good for your mental health. That sets off the stress hormone cortisol through your brain, through your body. And I've never really torn someone apart, never felt good about it. Other things like I do 30 mindful moments where your first cup of tea in the morning, people go, I can't, mindfulness is over my head. You can be mindful so easily. Like, I'll give you an example of being mindful is having your first cup of tea, drinking it and feeling that lovely warmth going down your throat into your stomach. That's being mindful, being just present for that split second. Do that 30 times a day. You don't have to lie on the floor and float. You don't have to do that. There's loads of ways of doing things. And I think a positive psychology has become probably basically how I've designed now my life and how I live it. I limit myself from toxic environments. If it's an environment I know is going to be something that's stressing me out, I just don't do it. Even if someone goes, oh, it'd be good for you. Yeah. You know, it's good for your career. I'm like, I don't give a shit. I don't want to do that. I don't feel good about doing that. Oh, you should go to that. I don't want to go to that. I don't want to. So life's too short to be running around doing that kind of stuff. So I think positive psychology is another brilliant strand that people should look into. It's
and it's a simple one as well. You can do yourself.
Oh, it's a lifestyle kind of shift. And the other thing is, like, you know, when you start this whole fake positivity of, like, you know, you might feel like you're doing that at the start. You might be going, oh, I don't really mean that, but I'll say it anyway. Get into the habit of it. And then after a while, it just becomes second nature to you. It becomes subconscious. It becomes just something you do. So sometimes, and don't get me wrong, like, the one thing I need to point out is that idea of be positive. There's been days in my past, if someone said that to me, they would have got a slap. You know, there's days where you just can't be.
Yeah.
You can't. You can, no matter how much you try, you can't. And those days you should just like what I do is I just let them come on me now. And I this mantra, my mate wrote this beautiful poem called "This Will Pass," and that's all I keep saying. This will pass, like a bad flu. This will pass. And luckily, those days are very rare for me now.
Yeah. Well, we've probably gone a bit over there as well. We want to keep people as engaged in the conversation as you possibly can.
Absolutely.
Be. But genuinely, I think you're doing excellent work. You're doing amazing work, and I think it's important for somebody like you as well, because you keep getting this whole, sure, you're 6'5" and good looking and athletic and a jock and all this, and you talk about that in the book too. So for somebody like you to come out with this type of stuff as well, and to attempt to educate people and very much practice what you preach, I think is awesome. So the book is called Me and My Mate Jeffrey, and I know you're doing a talk, I know you're doing a signing in Eason's. We should have the podcast up tomorrow, which is Friday. Yeah. So I know you're doing the talk in Eason's, or the signing in Eason's at 12 on Saturday. On O'Connell
Street, yeah. I'm doing one in Mullingar as well in Eason's on Wednesday at 6 o'clock.
Okay, we'll put all this in the piece, and we'll throw a link up as well for where people want to get the book too.
Thanks,
so, Bressie, man, thanks so much for coming in.
My pleasure. Thanks,
awesome.
Man. Cheers.